WB for and straight black pride, brothers and sisters. This is your brother, DC Radical One, with another Radical Report. And today we're going to talk about the controversial amendments that were submitted by the Biden administration to the 75th annual World Health Organization Assembly and the outcome of those amendments. And this is a story that very few people covered. We've had a lot of things going on in America, a lot of shootings and things like that. But this is a very important story. I wanted to cover it while it was happening. Interestingly enough, the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum meetings overlapped, and then those meetings were followed by the Bilderberg Conference, which ended yesterday here in Washington, D.C. So as we see, the elites, if you will, the rulers, the silent rulers of the planet who are trying their best to implement globalization and the one world government, they were quite busy. And the reason I couldn't cover any of this stuff here on YouTube was because I was banned for 1 week because of previous videos discussing course C19. So anyway, I'm back and we're going to go through I have 4 articles, so we're going to cover it from different angles. First, we're going to start with the mainstream article for Forbes, which was written before the event, so you can get an understanding of what's going on. And then we're going to go to some other articles as well. And then we'll go to an article that covered after the event. And we're going to cover some articles, some of them outside the United States. So we're going to start with this Forbes article here. And this is says the W.H.O. to discuss global pandemic treaty at World Health Assembly. And of course, that was May 22nd to May 28th. Says, you know the movie, the 1996 movie Independence Day, where much of the world united to defeat a common enemy? Well, during the COVID-19 pandemic that started in 2020, pretty much the opposite happened. The world was about as organized as an all-cat produced and directed episode of Dancing with the Stars, or rather, Dancing with the Stars who are also cats. The global pandemic response had relatively little coordination and little unity. In fact, it was more like the 1983 and 2009 TV miniseries V, where many politicians, personalities, social media accounts, and others seemed like they were actually trying to help the enemy. In this case, the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 SARS, that allowed the virus to kill over 6.27 million people and counting. They leave potentially millions upon millions more with long COVID and cost society boatloads of money. That's why the World Health Economic Forum will be discussing a possible global pandemic treaty at the upcoming 75th World Health Assembly in Geneva. Now, this is an interesting perspective. First of all, this person has to have a little age on him to remember the miniseries V. But this belief that if we just all have a coordinated response to everything, of course, leaves out the question, who is the one in charge of the coordinated response? Of course, it leaves out many other questions, which I won't discuss here because that's how I got the 1 week ban that I got a couple of weeks ago. But I just wanted to see what the quote unquote mainstream media would say about this. And so they're saying that the lack of coordination is what allowed the virus to spread and kill so many people. When in reality, I submit that it was the lack of cooperation by China, because they didn't want us to really find out what really happened that allowed this to take place. Nonetheless, let's continue with the article. It says, yet despite the clear need for more global coordination, Some politicians, some celebrities, and a bunch of social media accounts have been trying to guess what, argue against such a treaty. They even started a hashtag, Stop the Treaty. So, obviously, this article is simply to advocate for one world government using SARS-CoV-2 as a reason why that should be advocated. So, the question is, why are people opposing the treaty? And why do people ultimately oppose it? And so, I think I'm going to read a little bit of this next article and then we'll go into that part. Now it says, having no global agreement in place before the next pandemic is going to work out well, right? Picture a football team running on the field for a championship game with no real plan, no real strategy, no real agreement to play together, and players saying, I would do whatever I want to do with the ball because, freedom. So this person literally states that they are against freedom because of the next global pandemic. Now, how do we know there's going to be a next global pandemic? Now, I know that President Obama and Anthony Fauci predicted the last one, and Bill Gates. But maybe we should investigate their ability to accurately predict pandemics and try to figure out how pandemics have started before we start throwing away the rights of individual citizens and sovereign nations. And it says here in a commentary published in The Lancet on May 16th, a team of authors, most of whom were from the UK, wrote that the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted profound weaknesses in the global governance of health. Inadequate preparation, coordination, and accountability hampered the collective response of nations at each stage. They asserted that changes to the global health architecture are necessary to mitigate the health and socio-economic damage of the ongoing pandemic. So this article is very interesting, and we have an understanding of where they begin or what their belief is. So we're just going to bypass this, and then we're going to go to an article that counters this. So we're covering all perspectives here. We're not passing judgment. We're just looking at two different perspectives. I think we pretty much have the perspective here. This person saying we have to have global coordination on health regardless of rights in order to properly deal with the next pandemic. We got it. All right. Next, we have the Desert Review, which was written on May 12th, and it says Biden's amendments hand U.S. sovereignty to the W.H.O. Okay, now we're obviously completely different tone here in this article, and it says the Biden administration is setting the stage to hand ultimate control of America's healthcare system and the national and U.S. national sovereignty over to the World Health Organization. And that's not what the other article said, so let us read. It says on May 22nd through the 28th, 2022, the 75th World Health Assembly will convene at the United Nations headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. I thought the United Nations headquarters. Okay. Anyway, I digress. With delegates from 194 nations to vote on the Biden administration's amendments that will hand over national sovereignty and authority to the World Health Organization, which, during the COVID pandemic, carried the water buckets for the Chinese Communist Party regarding the Wuhan lab. So this person thinks like I think that a large part of the problem was the fact that the Wuhan lab was not investigated. We'll move forward. On January 18, 2022, officials from the Biden administration quietly sent the WHO extensive amendments without an official statement or a single press conference. That's interesting. If this was something that was beneficial, wouldn't they announce it? I didn't know that. These proposed amendments are written to strengthen the organization's ability to unilaterally intervene in the affairs of nations merely suspected of having a health emergency of possible concern to other nations. That is interesting. If these amendments are approved, the WHO will have the power to declare an international health emergency, nullifying the powers of nation states. The U.S. amendments delete a critical existing restriction in the regulations, which state, quote unquote, the WHO shall consult with and attempt to obtain verification from the state party in whose territories the event is allegedly occurring. This enables the Director General to declare health emergencies at will and can be used to justify ostracism and economic or financial actions against the targeted nation by other nations aligned with the WHO or wish to harm and control the accused nation. Now, this is interesting. This is an interesting perspective. So, what they're saying is that the World Health Organization would be able to declare a health emergency and then possibly put sanctions against the country for non-cooperation. That is interesting and could be a problem since we know that evidence can be manufactured. So in essence, this would allow the World Health Organization to do exactly what the United States did in Iraq when they accused them of having weapons of mass destruction. They manufactured flimsy evidence and then commits to attack the country. So it's so interesting that people were worried about United States sovereignty and being in a organization like the World Health Organization doing what the United States has already done to a country like Iraq 20 years ago. All right, let us move forward. It says COVID-19 make it the last pandemic. A report published by the United Nations in May 2021 claims that the pandemic would have been prevented if the WHO had been given more global authority. The report states in its current form the WHO does not possess such powers. To move on with the treaty, the WHO therefore needs to be empowered financially and politically. The treaty should possess an adaptable incentive regime, including sanctions such as public reprimand, economic sanctions, or denial of benefits. And I wonder what kind of benefits they mean here. So I'm not sure about that. It says on January 20th, 2021, Joe Biden sent a letter to Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary General and member of the Portuguese Socialist Party, retracting President Donald Trump's withdrawal from the WHO. Biden also appointed Dr. Anthony Fauci, head of National Institute of Allergic and Infectious Diseases, to represent the United States on the WHO Executive Committee. That is interesting for a lot of reasons. In March 2020, the WHO pushed democratic nations to implement lockdowns, mandates, vaccine passports, digital health surveillance, etc. In fact, the WHO has developed guidance and even technical specifications for member states to adopt interoperative standards for COVID-19 vaccine passports, labeled interim guidance. The WHO's latest release pushes new digital vaccine passports to be used on a global scale. The WHO openly states these personalized digital documents could be extended to capture vaccine status to protect against other diseases and may be used for continuity of care or as proof of vaccination for purposes other than healthcare, such as employment, university education, and international travel. Liberty Counsel founder and chairman Matt Staver stated, the Biden administration has now set America up to cede U.S. sovereignty concerning the health of Americans to the World Health Organization. The proposed amendments would give the WHO global jurisdiction over the United States, including the authority to declare national emergencies. We have already seen the lawless abuse of power under Joe Biden by the Centers for Disease Control, which the courts have fortunately blocked. Americans would have little recourse against the WHO. America must not give up its sovereignty to the WHO. And as far as that CDC discussion, I believe he's talking about the blocking of mandates by the CDC, which that situation caused a lot of economic hardship to a lot of people, especially a lot of black people, and people I know personally lost their job behind these vaccine mandates. So that article was very interesting. Now we're going to read this international article that was written May 18th, 2022. This is the blog of European Journal of International Law. And that says the far-reaching U.S. proposals to amend the international health regulation at the upcoming 75th World Health Assembly, a call for action. And it says the upcoming 75th World Assembly, to be held in Geneva, Switzerland, 2022, will adopt far-reaching amendments to the 2005 international health regulations. The IHR is currently the most important multilateral treaty regulating the global architecture for health emergency preparedness, response, and resiliency. The extensive amendments to the IHR have been initiated by the United States, listed as agenda item WHA 75/18 for the 75th WHA. The amendments are already backed by 19 co-sponsor states and the EU. As of yet, there has been no public awareness or debate of the substantial amendments to the IHR, although the WHO Secretariat circulated the U.S. initiative first in January 2022 to state parties. The U.S. initiative contradicts the gist of a report by the WHO Director General issued in November 2021, which sketched out some of the amendments now tabled by the U.S., but which also indicates that the IHR will not be renegotiated, raising a number of concerns about amending the IHR. Attention to the U.S. amendments was further drowned by the stir made by the launch of the negotiations to draft a new treaty of pandemic preparedness and response by 2024, with hitherto uncertain scope, content, and outcome, as well as uncertain relationship to the existing legal framework of the IHR. The scope of the proposed U.S. amendments might therefore come as a surprise to a number of delegations to the 75th World Health Assembly. So this is interesting, because if you go back here, it says attention to U.S. amendments was further drowned out by the stir made around the launch of negotiations to draft a new treaty in response by 2024. So this is the opening salvo, I believe, by reading that, to test people's response. But they're coming with a completely new treaty by 2024, which is a year and a half from now. So even though this part was defeated, they're coming with something which will be similar and possibly even more stricter in the future. And let's read a little more into this right here. It says increasing the WHO director's executive emergency powers and its implications. Under Article 12.1 of the current IHR, read in conjunction with Article 1.1 IHR, the WHO Director General already has broad executive power to declare a public health emergency of international concern when faced with extraordinary event in one state which is determined to constitute a public health risk to other states through the international spread of disease and to potentially require a coordinated international response, quote unquote. In this process, the Director General shall enter into extensive consultations with the state party in whose territory the event occurs and come to a mutual conclusion within 48 hours on whether the event indeed constitutes a PHEIC, which is a public health emergency of international concern. The proposed U.S. amendments to Article 12 IHR will both considerably extend the executive powers of WHO Director General to declare a global emergency-like situations and centralize this power further by removing the need to consult and find agreement with their respective state party. The former is achieved first via the introduction of a new category of an intermediate public health alert that requires heightened international response of a hitherto undefined low threshold. Whenever you want to take away people's rights, making things undefined or nebulous is always the way to go. Second, the U.S. amendment suggests granting new overlapping layers of executive emergency powers to the 6 WHO regional directors to declare a public health emergency of regional concern. There is no indication as to the division of powers between the regional and international levels to declare health emergencies, nor are there any proposals as to how to increase the WHO generals and regional directors' executive powers is to be safeguarded against abuse. That part is interesting. The importance of these questions becomes clear when practical and legal consequences of PHEIC and PHREC intermediate public health declarations are considered. The powers of emergency committees set up by the WHO director in response to such emergencies to issue recommendations to states to adopt medical and non-medical countermeasures, which, as has become clear with regards to responses to COVID-19, can have far-reaching implications for the livelihoods, lives, health, and human rights of individuals around the world. In addition, WHO emergency declarations can trigger fast-track development and subsequent global distribution and administration of unlicensed investigational diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. This is done via the WHO's emergency use listing procedure. The introduction of an intermediate public health alert in particular will further incentivize the pharmaceutical industry's move to activate domestic fast-track emergency trial protocols, as well as for advanced purpose production and stockpile agreements with governments before the existence of a concrete health threat to the world's population has been detected, as is already the case under the WHO's EULP via the procedure developed for a pre-public health emergency phase. Let's stop right there. That's a lot to get into. So basically, what this is saying is that these amendments further allow for the development of experimental vaccines, the distribution and use of experimental, not just vaccines, but other healthcare measures. The pharmaceutical companies can get rich without necessarily even proving that what they have works because of the emergency use listing procedure, and also that there are no measures to rein in the WHO once all these powers are given to them. So again, this is a European Journal of International Law, and they seem very concerned with this situation as well. And we can see from this article why. So now we're going to see the last article, which gives us the outcome of all of this. And we see that this is a very complex issue that should have been covered by all of the media. I did not see any mainstream media discuss any of this at all. Like I said, I got the information probably a mere days before I wanted to make a video then, and interestingly enough, I was banned from making any videos for YouTube. All right, now the Tennessee Star, and this is from June 2nd, 2022, says Biden proposal to surrender U.S. health sovereignty to World Health Organization dealt stunning defeat. Says the Biden administration was dealt a stunning blow at the World Health Assembly last week in its attempt to push through 13 amendments to the international health regulations that would hand over U.S. decision-making power regarding healthcare policies to the World Health Organization. At the in Geneva, Switzerland. Biden's proposed amendments, which it quietly sent to the WHO in January, received hearty support from nations such as the United Kingdom and Australia, as well as from the European Union, all of which urged nation member states of the WHO to surrender their healthcare sovereignty to the Global Health Agency of the United Nations. None of the 13 amendments were adopted, however, during the WHA meeting. Other nations, including Africa, and this is written funny because it says Africa, Brazil, Brunei, Namibia, which is in Africa, Bangladesh, Russia, Malaysia, India, China, of course, and Iran, all expressed concern about Biden's proposed administrations, with Brazil especially asserting that it would choose to exit the WHO entirely rather than allow its people to be made subservient to the global agency. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro emphatically rejected the WHO's pandemic treaty, which is related but separate from the IHR amendments. Brazil will not be getting into this WHO pandemic treaty, Bolsonaro said. Brazil is autonomous. I've already spoke to our foreign relations cabinet, and if that proposal goes forward, it won't be with Brazil. In a video posted to Twitter, German globalist founder of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, is heard saying, "Let's also be clear, the future is not just happening, the future is being built by us, a powerful community. You, here in this room, we all have the means to impose this state, quote unquote, of the future on the world." That is interesting. And they may have that clip in here, but I'm not sure. Let's see. We have Brazil, and they have Mr. Schwab here on Twitter. All right, you know what? Let's see if this plays here. I'm gonna see if this clip plays.
Second way of contributing to make this a better world is to look at all those issues in a holistic way. Political, economic, social, and ecological dimensions of every issue today are intertwined. So here we are, and you may ask, why do we have 400 sessions? It is to deal with all the aspects of our global system. Let's also be clear. The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room. We have the means to improve the state of the world. But two conditions are necessary. The first one is that we act all as stakeholders of larger communities, that we serve not our only self-interests, but we serve the community. That's what we call stakeholder responsibility. And second, that we collaborate. And this is the reason why you find many opportunities here during the meeting to engage into very action and impact-oriented initiatives to make progress related to specific issues on the global agenda.
So, the article apparently was correct, and Mr. Schwab essentially says we have the opportunity to rule the world as we see fit, and that's why you're here. That's at least how I translated what he said. So, anyway, whenever people accuse people of being conspiracy theorists about the World Economic Forum and these globalists and elitists and whatnot, well, there's a reason why with that type of language. Anyway, as the WHA continued, Reuters reported May 25th on the objections to the Biden amendments raised by African nations. The African region shares the views that the process should not be fast-tracked. Moses Kitili, deputy permanent secretary in Botswana's health ministry, told the W.H.O on Tuesday. Additionally, an African delegate at the assembly reportedly said, "We find that they are going too quickly and these sorts of reforms cannot be rushed through." Salute to the African bloc for taking a stand. Canadian Conservative Member of Parliament Dr. Leslyn Lewis celebrated the defeat of the Biden administration's. She said on Twitter, "A huge victory for Canadians who care about healthcare sovereignty. The 13 amendments to the WHO international health regulations did not pass." So we see opposition to this from several corners. Liberty Counsel, a Christian ministry litigation firm, reported on the objection of a new set of amendments and amendments nations were pushed to approve. It says, quote unquote, during the WHA in Geneva on Tuesday, May 24th, a new set of amendments, conference page 7, was submitted in complete violation of Article 55, Section 2 of the IHR, which requires amendments to be submitted at least 4 months prior to the WHA. After more than 50 nations objected, the Secretary reserved room so that they could have backroom discussions in order to persuade those countries that were objecting to the amendments. These efforts failed. A working group, however, has been established to continue the process of discussing proposed IHR amendments and the separate new pandemic treaty. The IHR amendments proposed timeline span from September 30th, 2022 to May 2023, the next WHA meeting. A working draft of the new pandemic treaty is now proposed for August 1st, stressing the importance of Americans to remain wary of efforts to cede U.S. sovereignty for the sake of globalism. Psychiatrist Peter Breggin, author of COVID-19 and the Global Predators, We Are the Prey, never heard of that book, said during his appearance on May 25th on Steve Bannon's War Room, the true goal of globalism has never been for humanity, but to drain wealth and power upward. Breggin explained that WHO has become a spearhead of draining wealth upward and power upward and has been really effective during COVID-19, and they've been working closely with the CDC. Independent researcher James Roguski has chronicled the events leading up to the WHA and its aftermath at his Substack column, where multiple videos of the proceedings are available for viewing. Representative Chris Smith, Republican from New Jersey, ranking member of the House Global Health Subcommittee, welcomed the defeat of the Biden administration Friday in a statement noting it is reassuring to see public outcry by a number of countries, in particular Brazil, but also African nations and civil societies such as Malaysia, and the subsequent withdrawal of the Biden administration to the international health regulations. Smith warned, nevertheless, that Americans must continue to be vigilant against any temporary strategic retreat to ensure the Biden administration does not quietly reintroduce its egregious amendments in the dead of night, especially in light of its initial submission on January 18th, 2022, without any public notice whatsoever. Wait a minute, brothers and sisters. He said that this was submitted January 18, 2022. The interesting thing about that is, if I'm not mistaken, isn't the president inaugurated on January 20th? So how does that work? If anybody is a constitutional scholar or in the legal profession, can you explain how that's possible for the president to make these types of moves before he's actually inaugurated as the president? Isn't the previous president the president until power is handed over on that day? If I'm wrong, somebody please correct me in the comment section, because I apparently do not understand the U.S. Constitution and how the transfer of power actually works, or maybe I simply have my dates wrong. Nonetheless, we will continue to follow this story as long as the YouTube channel is up, but we see that this is a very complex and important issue that has not been covered by the media for some strange reason, And the fact that the Biden administration would submit these things at a time when it's very possible they didn't even have the authority to do so, and that there was very little coverage of this for the previous 4 months, and it seemed to take not only regular citizens by surprise, but even nation states and members of the World Health Assembly, makes us think that there's some type of nefarious activity going on here. So as I said, brothers and sisters, we will definitely be following this story and be on the lookout for more amendments and more things being done, not just by the Biden administration or the World Health Organization or the World Economic Forum. We will keep our eye out for any such things that tend to be ignored by major media, which will affect the sovereignty and the health and the economic status of black people here in America, black people around the world. And in a situation like this affects the sovereignty of America, so it affects everyone that is here in America. So with that, brothers and sisters, I thank you all for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Again, I am your brother, DC Radical 1, and this has been the Radical Report. With that, I say a BB for Hodie and straight black pride. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also follow us on our other social media platforms. On Instagram, we're at dc.radical1. On Twitter, we're at dc_radical_ONE. And the Cash App is $DC Radical, the number 1. Thank you again.